Today on Detroit Muscle, we're plugging our highly modded Hemi into Project Stray Cat, the Power Stop Ultimate Challenger giveaway car. But that's not all. We're gonna make her hyperventilate with some twin turbos.
Hey guys, today we're back on the late model muscle train. We've begun building this 2010 Challenger SRT8 to take on the biggest, baddest kid on the block. The reigning king of Detroit horsepower is the Challenger Hellcat, touting 707 ponies at the crankshaft. These things are no joke. See what I mean?
So in order to stand a chance against that monster, we have to create a monster of our own. We started with a complete suspension rebuild, including new coil-over struts, along with beefier sway bars. The rear had to be swapped out as well, along with a new set of much stronger half shafts. And we partnered with Power Stop brakes on this car, where we got this upgraded set of rotors, along with their street and track pad sets, and high-performance powder-coated calipers. This is the foundation for our Stray Cat Mopar that we're giving away to one of you, the Power Stop Ultimate Challenger.
All right guys, we got our Challenger back here in the shop and on the lift, and all that suspension work we did a while back, well, a lot of it's laying right here on this rolly cart, but there's a reason why. We're fixing to bolt that big shiny piece of metal onto it.
Well, you guys might remember, no sooner did we get our Challenger here in the building, guys down at Engine Power, well, they took out our Hemi. Well, it's back, and it's a whole lot different from where it started.
First thing they did was pull that factory engine out, and we stole our car back from them. Once it was torn down, it got a bath in the hot wash, machined, painted, and then the goodies started to go in. A forged crank, H-beam rods, and forged pistons on the bottom side. A hydraulic roller cam, along with a double roll timing set, round out the short block. New lifters and retainers were set in place. The factory heads were CNC ported, then hand finished for more flow. A new spring pack was installed, and they got a custom valve job to go with it.
With it all together, they reinstalled our intake with a nice new wrinkly black paint job and some awesome new billet valve covers. Now, Chrysler really did their homework when designing this 6.1 for the SRT8s. One example of that are these stainless steel exhaust manifolds. They're actually shorty headers, and a lot of guys use these to upgrade the 5.7s. And while we were at it, we went ahead and used some ARP stainless hardware.
While this is out of the car, we'll replace some of the wearable parts like this idler pulley, along with the tensioner, both of which we got from Dynotech. It's a lot easier to replace these before the engine and induction system are installed. And since they don't cost much, we might as well do it now. Now right now, this motor mount isn't really bad, but it is showing some dry rot, so we're gonna go ahead and swap it out. Not to mention, we're gonna be throwing some pretty serious power at it, so we shouldn't take any chances.
We got some new mounts from rockauto.com, and to swap them, you unbolt these pedestals, bolt the new ones on them, and get them fastened right back in place. The easiest way to install this engine is going to be on the front subframe from the bottom. Put up a little bit.
We can let it down and kind of go from there.
All right. The good news is that since this is a factory block with mostly factory dimensions, we don't have to reinvent the wheel to get it installed.
Now, Mark, you need to come over here and look at this angle. Think about that. Some 33s, 35s.
Oh yeah.
Son.
With everything at home, we can bolt the subframe in and we're good to go. Since we're going to be throwing a bunch of power at our SRT8 Challenger, one of the things we need to look at is the transmission. Now, the factory NAG1 transmission that comes in those SRT8s is really good, except when you start adding a lot of power. So we turn to level 10 for one of their bulletproof Challenger transmissions. One of the weak links in the factory transmission is the valve body. What'll happen is it'll leak, which will lower your fluid pressure and eventually cause your clutches to slip. Now, when those clutches slip, that creates heat, and that heat will destroy this conductor plate. So what level 10 does is they completely redesign this valve body with higher line pressure and install a new conductor plate. Not only will this valve body not leak, but it'll also send more fluid volume to that cooler, keep everything cool and happy. Another weak point is this input hub assembly. Now what happens is this thing will crack, and that'll cause the fluid to leak and cause your clutches to burn up. What level 10 does is they include an upgraded one that's both heat and cold treated. Another key component that they upgrade are the clutches. These are the factory organic ones, and they upgrade to this high energy friction material that is resistant to heat. They also include a torque converter that's spec'd out specifically for you depending on your needs. Now we chose a 9.5 inch 3000 stall with a multi-disc lockup. Now these transmissions are built to handle 500 horsepower, or you can have them build one just for you to handle all the way up to 1200 like the one we got. Just another tip, these are also good for the Magnums and the Chargers.
So the next thing we're ready to do to our Challenger is bolt on the Flexplate. Now we went to Summit Racing and got us a billet unit that's going to be more than strong enough, and to keep it in place, we got a set of ARP fasteners. We'll get these torqued down to 70 foot-pounds, then we can move on to getting that tranny in. Much like the engine, this trans uses a factory-style housing, which prevents you from needing any modifications to get it installed.
After the break, it's turbo time. Then later, we get a look at our Stray Cats competition.
Whether you're autocrossing, drag racing, or out on an open track, your factory wheel studs need an upgrade.
Late model and pro touring cars flourish at the autocross and track days, but the stock wheel studs are not meant for this type of abuse. Now, we've seen factory studs shear off on hard drag launches and fail under heavy cornering loads, and that puts you and your car at risk. C5 and C6 Corvette hubs are used in many hot rods. Most pro touring cars have aftermarket rear axles that have been updated to half-inch studs. This kit from ARP allows you to use the same half-inch lug nuts on all four corners. They also come in 2 lengths in case you use wheel spacers or for the drag strip. Swapping over to ARP half-inch wheel studs is a smart way to go. Made of heat-treated 8740 chrome moly, they have a tensile strength of 200,000 psi. Just ream the hole to half-inch and press the new studs in. As a bonus, if you switch between street and race tires, the rolled threads and nut starter on these ARP studs make that job way easier. Hey, we're back with our giveaway SRT8, and we're getting ready to start installing our power adder. But before we can go too far down that road, we have to get the car ready. That's going to require that we remove the front fascia along with the hood. In order to make that big power number that we need to make to beat the Hellcat, we're going to add boost. So we turn to Hellion Power Systems for one of its SRT8 twin turbo kits. Now this is a complete kit that comes with everything you need to install it on your car. And the best part, doesn't require any cutting or hacking. Of course, the centerpiece of the kit is the turbos. Now the base kit comes with twin 61mm units, which will provide you between 500 and 1,000 horsepower. But we decided to upgrade to these 67mm ball bearing units with the fancy billet wheel. One of the most daunting things about installing turbos would have to be the tubing. But Hellion takes care of all that with all the tubes pre-bent and welded. Now these are all stainless steel and carry a lifetime warranty. To keep that boost from running away from you, the kit also comes with a boost controller, twin 45mm wastegates, and this 50mm blow-off valve. All of these things are going to allow us to easily surpass the power output of a Hellcat, but it's not all about peak numbers. Since turbos are driven by the energy produced by your exhaust rather than driven by a belt which drops power from your engine like a supercharger, it can actually improve your fuel mileage. But let's be honest, who really cares about that when we're going to be making the cool noises these things are going to make?
All right, before some of those big cool pieces go on, a few small pieces have to go on to make sure this thing works properly. One of them, we got to change the map sensor. Another thing, we've got to change the thermostat to a degree or so a little cooler. And then we got to add this port, which is going to be the oil line supply for our turbos.
One of the things you have to do with this kit is shorten the studs that are on the collector flange here. That just leaves a little bit more room when the turbo comes and mounts up here. There's no interference. The way Hellion designed this kit is to have the turbos mounted down low here underneath the car. That's a little different than most turbo systems you see where they're up in the engine bay. The advantage of doing it this way is that the whole hot side is down under the car, keeps the heat out of your engine bay. But we did have to assemble it on the bench because the way everything fits so tightly, you wouldn't be able to assemble it in the car.
A ratcheting wrench is really handy in this situation. There's not a lot of room to get a socket on there. All right, guys, the next thing that we're ready to do is install our air-to-air intercooler by Spiraco. Now, it installs pretty easily. You just slide it up here with a couple of brackets, and it mounts just behind the bumper.
This big intercooler is a super important piece, and that's why it comes with the Hellion kit. It cools down the charge of air that's being sent to the intake. Cooler air means, you guessed it, more power.
Up next, it's the most powerful factory muscle car ever built. Step in for a ride in a Hellcat.
We've been involved with Mopar since the 70s. Actually, we were messing with these cars when they were new. I liked the way the cars looked back when they were new, the styling cues and stuff on them. Some of the cars were more aggressive than some of the other manufacturers, just by the way they look. The aggressiveness of the styling, especially on a Challenger, the body lines on it, the way the grille looks, it just had a meaner look to it than what some of the other cars on the road at the time had.
With the second coming of the muscle car era, manufacturers began offering their own modern rendition of the 60s and 70s era muscle machines. Ford has the Shelby GT500, Chevy with their Camaro ZL1, and Dodge with their Challenger SRT8.
Well, when they started coming out with the new retro muscle cars, you know, the Camaro and the Mustang and whatnot, they were hitting some pretty good numbers, and we didn't have anything to run with it.
Chrysler didn't like their third place title, and the charge for perfection began.
So when the Challenger came out in '08, it entered the market in the highest end mode. It was an SRT and not just a regular Challenger with a V6 or something like that. And they put the highest performance variant on the market first. They were playing catch up and they knew it, but they did a pretty good job with that. The biggest problem we have with these cars is that they're heavy, but they all suffer from that.
In 2015, the Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat was born. With 707 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque, this road rocket is the most powerful muscle car in history.
The first time you step into 700 horsepower, it's an eye-opening experience. It's the most powerful street car I've ever driven. car, you really got to pay attention to what you're doing when you drive it. It'll get away from you.
The boys in Detroit have outdone themselves.
It'll go from 0 to 100 miles an hour so fast you really can't keep up with it.
So this Hellcat might be considered a time machine. It'll take you to a better place in your past. And no worries, this thing's got plenty of horsepower to get you there.
Up next, we'll demystify the plumbing for a twin turbo system.
All right, guys, while you were gone, we went ahead and mounted up all of our tubing of our system. Now, it's pretty simple. It mounts to the turbo using some high heat hose and a couple clamps. Now, there's several of these in the system, but all this tubing routes up front to our intercooler. And coming out of the intercooler is more tubing and hoses and such that run all the way up to the engine, and that's what's feeding the throttle body. Now, one key part to this system is this blow-off valve, and what it does is whenever the turbos are spooled up and the system is pressurized and you let off the gas, well, that pressure has to go somewhere, and this little jewel will release it.
To get our turbo system all plumbed up, it took a lot of tubing and a bunch of clamps as well. For those of you that are at home that may not know all the different types of clamps that are out there, let's take a look at a few.
Detroit Muscle presents Back to Basics, tips for the beginner gearhead.
The first type, and definitely the most common, are your typical radiator hose clamps. This is a spring style clamp, and you've probably seen these before and probably busted your knuckles trying to get them off. This is a factory style clamp, and they hold really well for radiator hoses, heater hoses, things like that. A lot of you guys have ditched those spring style clamps for a worm gear clamp. These are easy to use and they can be found anywhere, but they only have so much clamping force. When you're plumbing a boosted application, a regular worm gear style clamp will work just fine on really low boost. But if you're jumping up to a higher boost, like we are with our twin turbos, you need a T-bolt style clamp. The advantage of the T-bolt style clamp, the surface area is wider than a regular worm gear style, and also the mechanism that it clamps with is different. The worm gear can fail. You've probably seen that if you've over tightened one of these before, and with the T-bolt style clamp, it's just a bolt and a lock nut, so you can cinch it down really tight, and you don't have to worry about that nut backing off. When you're talking about really high boosted applications, say like a race car, or if you want just a really clean look, you can go with a locking style clamp like this HD series from Vibrant Performance. The way this works is you have these ends that just weld into your cold side tubing, slide over the collar, and lock it in with the clamp. It even comes with a pin, keep it all locked in. Another cool thing about these is once you get it all sealed up, you don't have to worry about it coming loose, and you've got about 10 to 15 degrees of movement on each side. But when you're talking about exhaust clamps, you need something that not only has clamping force, but can also handle the heat, like this ceiling style exhaust clamp here. This is really great for regular exhaust systems. But when you're going to a boosted application, you need to step up to this V-band clamp. This is very similar to a T-bolt style clamp, only there's flanges here that weld into the system and fit into these grooves in the clamp. Now, this isn't every type of clamp that's out there, but this gives you a pretty good idea for which one you need for your application.
Now, we just about got our Hellcat twin turbo kit installed today, but we still have a few minor things we're going to have to address, like the oiling system for the turbos and a little bit of wiring, but that's no big deal. Now, we still have some upgrades we're going to have to do to the car to support that big number that we're trying to achieve, like the fuel system and the exhaust. Now, I tell you what, I do believe this old car is going to be a whole lot of fun to drive.
Well, we've been working on our own Dodge Challenger today, but if you've got a Hellcat and you're looking to add a few more horsepower to that supercharged 6.2 Hemi, then you need to take a look at this. This is the AFE Power Momentum GT cold air intake. It's for the 2015 and 16 Dodge Challenger Hellcat, and with 11% more flow, it'll help you gain up to 37 horsepower and 33 pound-feet of torque. The kit comes with a lot of cool features, including these really nice T-bolt clamps, a molded MAF housing, and your choice of either a dry or pre-oiled reusable filter.
Well, let's jump from shiny new cars to old rusty ones. Now, we've all dealt with trying to get rust off of old parts or tools, you name it. Well, here's a safe way to do that that's non-toxic, and it'll save you a trip to the blaster. Evaporust is a biodegradable and reusable rust remover that is water-based, and is safe to the touch. We've used it to remove rust from several parts around here, and once the part is soaked, you can literally wipe the rust off. This could be a must-have for that restoration project you're working on, so check it out. It may end up saving you a whole lot of work. But we're all out of time for right now, guys, so y'all keep it between the ditches.